This is my RCX 400 series telescope, and as you might have gathered from my previous videos, there is a way to achieve focus manually with these when these focusing systems stop working. But those videos had a lot of trial and error because I wasn't really familiar with the system, so I thought I'd just do another one, encompass everything together, and make it a bit shorter, or at least a bit more concise. So a couple of things. If you have an RCX 400 and you have the issue where the front focusing mechanism, or at least the focusing mechanism no longer works, it's usually because of some kind of miscommunication between the front and the back, or issues with the back board. No one's really figured out that mystery, okay? So with a conventional Schmidt-Cassegrain or Maksutov or any type of telescope with a rear focusing system, you have a knob that turns and moves his mirror forward or backwards, all right, along this little central tube. And sometimes you get mirror shift, and some of the larger telescopes are sold with electronic focusers in the back, which you could use in place of the stock focusing mechanism. And what you do is you find your rough perfect point for your eyepieces, and then you lock that in place, and then you just use the rear focuser to go back and forth, or even a Crayford. So you can use the same type of system for this if this fails you. Now, a couple of things here. I'm going to take off the front shroud, which I've already started loosening up just to save time. And there are 3 screws, one here, here, and here. And these are Allen screws. Okay, and I believe the fitting for that is 3:30 seconds, but you can figure it out. Okay, you just take off 3 of these little things here. All right, don't lose them. And this is plastic. Do not drop it. When it goes on, it only goes off in one direction. You cannot twist it, so you'll know if it's on because it'll fit. So put that away, and again, it's plastic, don't drop it, all right? Because you cannot get parts of these anywhere. Now, if you notice here, you have 3 focus rail systems, okay? Here, there, and the bottom, and they consist of a board with a front and a rear limiter. There's a little diode. Inside, there's a connector, of course, and here there's a metal rail, very smooth metal rail, and then behind it there's it looks like a bicycle scope. It's basically a long screw, and there are 2 nuts on the end of it, okay? Now, this mechanism here is the actual focusing mechanism. What happens when you focus this, the motor in the back, which is coupled to the front with a long coupler, rotates this and moves this forward and backwards, and this is connected to the corrector plate assembly, which is right here. So when you're focusing, the entire front corrector plate moves forward and backwards, forward and backwards. Collimation is done by adjusting the 3 positions of the mirrors. Okay, the central mirror, which is your secondary mirror, is fixed like a Maksutov. All right. So what seems to happen, the theory is that for whatever reason, there's a bugger on the board, and that will not recognize the movement here, because these boards are very simple. It's a front limiter or rear limiter. There's nothing in here that tells you how many times you've turned. That's all on the board there. So when you go through your focus calibration, that's your first step. If you're having problems with focusing, what happens is it will find the front minimum travel, and then it will take the one that's moving the slowest, and you notice it'll rotate very slowly until it gets to the front, and then it says, okay, this is my calibration point for all 3 motors. And if that works, fantastic. If you then go to focus, and then 2 of them move, and then the first one either moves more or less, or moves and stops and then starts reversing, okay, you got a problem with the rear board. Now, to access the rear board, there are 4 Allen screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, which I believe are 1/8 Allen. Okay, you can figure it out. Keep in mind, though, there's a fan here. And if you remove the back without first engaging or disconnecting the connector for the fan, you will damage your board. And the connector for the fan is over here. Now, when you take these off, if you dare do such a thing, you will see that all of the connectors have just a little bit of hot glue on the connectors. Okay, it's a very soft glue. Hold on a second. And you can peel it off very, very gently. But you don't want to put any stress on the board here because you may cause other issues. So this is the back, you see? Put that away. And again, that's also plastic. It's also what you don't want to drop. When you put these things back on, do not over tighten, because you know what happens when you over tighten plastic. Yeah. So motor. This one's kind of hidden away. On the back of the motors, you have connectors, dampeners. You again have a little, looks to be an encoder, 1, 2, and 3. And these all go through, and they're connected to these connectors here. Now mine are off because I've made a focuser for it, but we'll talk about that later. So they're connected, and I can't remember which order they're in. I should have written it down. So it could be left, right, and below, or right, left, and below, or whatever. And this is your board. So there are specific chips here which control the movement of the motors, and I think those are the chips that bugger up either some issue with the solder, I don't know, or it could be some issue with the firmware in the chip, I don't know, and I don't think you're going to find that information anywhere, but if you do, please pass it along. Help out your fellow RCX sufferers, okay? So when you want to focus with the normal focusing system, what happens again is these 3 motors will turn, and these are connected with a long rod in here that you don't see. So on this motor, there's a shaft, looks like this, okay, the end of the shaft. And there's a coupler that has another connector on the end that looks like this, and they go together, okay? Almost like a universal joint in your car. And on the front, same thing. You have a shaft here, and you have a shaft on the actual rod. So those have rubber couplers inside to keep the vibration down, and if the rubber couplers just slip out, then you will not be able to focus. How you know that is if you go to use your focus and you find that 2 of the motors turn and 1 motor does not turn at all, good chance it slipped out. Or if you check the tension on the one that's not moving by gently rotating this with a socket, which is 5/16, and which you do not add onto a power drill. Okay, this be very gentle. You just put that on and then gently turn that. If you find that there's different resistance, then probably the coupler fell off, and that's a pain in the neck getting on, but it can be done. Well, most likely it's just because the motor's not working. So what you then have to do is figure out how to focus the front. Okay, so what you do is you get yourself a Crayford focuser. I don't have one for you, but it's a demonstration, but you know how they work. You put them on the back, a door, an egg shape, you'll know that you're looking at the right one. Then what you can do is adjust your focuser with the Crayford, and hopefully you can get a reasonably sharp image. Even though the collimation is off, if you get a sharp image, at least you know you can adjust it. So then you collimate by gently rotating these 3 screws, as you will with any Schmidt grain, clockwise or counterclockwise until you get that little collimation egg in the middle, and hopefully it'll be okay. And then you again adjust your focus. Now, if you're lucky enough to achieve focus or close focus and then collimation on the first shot, what you'll find is as you adjust the front to adjust your collimation, you will throw your focus off, okay? And it could very well be that in order for you to achieve focus, your Crayford will be one extreme or another, okay? And then what you do then is you try to achieve your focus, your collimation, and then if you find that you've got no travel on one side or the other, you focus with your, you try to focus with your Crayford to where you should be, and then you can rotate each of these 3 screws equally in one direction or the other in order to achieve focus. So what you do is you're moving the corrector plate forward or backwards equally so that you're compensating for the lack of focus travel on your Crayford. All right, so you're looking at Polaris. You just happen to, luck out, and with your Crayford at halfway travel, you can adjust these to get proper collimation and proper focus. You're doing okay. Then you check your eyepieces. If you throw in, let's say, your widest angle eyepiece or your shortest focal length, or the longest, whichever way you want to start, you may find that you can focus in one direction but not the other. And if you have travel in one way but not the other, you can try to compensate by cheating it, where you adjust your focuser forward or backwards, and then again adjust these so that you've got that happy spot where you can put in your widest eyepiece and your tightest eyepiece, and you're going to be okay. When I first tried it, I had the ability to focus with a 3.5 millimeter, and I was just at the edge of that. But when I went to a 32 millimeter, it was just off. I didn't have the travel space for it. So when I compensated for the 32, I could not focus the 3.5. So you might ask yourself which one you can use the most. But if you find that you adjust it for one extreme, let's say you're 3.5 or you're 5 or whatever it is, and then when you go outwards the other way, you don't have enough travel back for your longer eyepieces, and you want to test then whether or not you need to pull the eyepiece further out by loosening the eyepiece and pulling it up in the barrel. And if you find that there's a bit of space in there and you can get a focus, what you might want to do is look for a par focal ring and put that on there. And if you don't want to buy a par focal ring because you have a bunch of eyepieces and it gets expensive, just cut some out of ABS too. And I've got some here to show you. Give me a second here. I did not put all these things out ahead of time. Alright, so that's a par focal ring that I made out of ABS. And when you cut it with your saw, you find that, your chop saw, you find that you're never really going to get an exactly flat cut because this flexes. But then when you sand it down to take off on the smooth edges or the rough edges and smooth it all out, when you're using this, the eyepiece will always sit flat because the barrel, the barrel is deep enough. Okay, whoops, wrong way, is deep enough to accept it. And you see there's a gap here, but that's okay, because once you tighten it down, the eyepiece is not going to move back and forth because this will always add the distance equal to the thickest part of the par focal ring, so it's not a big deal. But we're kind of going off topic here. Let's go back to the Crayford. So you've got your Crayford focuser on there. You find a happy medium where you can get both. That's great. Then just put the front back on. Put the back on and enjoy your telescope by using the focuser. Now, I didn't want to do that. I did it. It did work, but I wanted to remove that extra pound of metal from the back because I didn't want to have to start weighing the front in order to compensate. Because I use a 2-inch eyepiece, and the Crayford with a prism, with a large 2-inch, like a 50 millimeter, added a lot of weight. So what I want to do there is compensate by removing the Crayford, and I made an electric focuser. And there is a really good schematic of this on cloudy nights. Look it up. And what this does is this might take my direction forward or backwards. Actually I'm going to bring that up a bit so I realize now you can't see it. And I have to make the battery box prettier. This is just an AA cell battery box, and I have a connector. And I'm going to eventually wire this up to take 12 volts off of probably the reticle power supply, but I'm not sure if the reticle power supply on this one is always on or if you have to activate it with your handset, because there is a reticle on-off button. But this is the actual focuser here, and I've got 3 buttons here which are for 3 motors, 1, 2, 3. I've got a momentary switch here. I've got a potentiometer here. I've got a forward, neutral, back here. So what this does is this lets me focus forward or reverse with various power, various speeds. So I can go very, very slow. And then I can, if I find the collimation is off, I can adjust it by shutting off each individual motor until I can get the right adjustment. What I find in the wintertime when it's really cold is sometimes it'll throw it off collimation just a bit. And I think it's because of the either friction due to the cold on the rails, so make sure that everything's clean and lubricated here and the screw, or it could just be the motors are getting old perhaps. So I'll give you an example of how this works. Here we have slow speed, a little faster maybe, and then here reverse. Okay, and I can vary the speed very, very slow. Okay, so it's just an electronic controller. So what I can do is then focus electronically instead of having to use a Crayford. But in the meantime, if you don't have one of those, or you don't feel like making yourself one, or don't know anyone who can make one for you, then you can just use the the Crayford system. Hope this helps. Now, the motor connectors, by the way, are here, these 3 wires, and then I just have them connected here and then tied on with a wrap here in order to not put any stress on the back of the board. I'll make it prettier one day. Right now I'm not going to worry about it. So again, use the Crayford. Try to focus on Polaris. It's the easiest star to work with. And if you can achieve almost focus, then adjust the front. Individual motors with that socket very, very slowly, one way or the other, until you get it in focus, collimated, and then hopefully you can find your happy spot and use it. And if not, you may have to tweak it by adjusting your focus and moving everything forward or backwards. And once you do, you put all the straws back on and enjoy your telescope. Hope this helps. Have yourself a great day and clear nights to you.